Alright, today we're going to be making our first wood carving knife. If you've been following along in these series, you'll have maybe heard me talk about keeping your blunt leftover X-Acto blades, and we'll be using them on this project. You don't have to use them if you don't want. I'll just be showing this kind of one method. You can make a hole any way you want. You can drill it out if you want, but just in case, I just wanted to have another option for be more accessible to everyone. So this is what the final product's going to kind of look like. This is a little X-ray illustration of the tang, which is what we call the bottom of the blade inside the handle. And you're basically going to shape a handle some, and then you're going to make a hole. We're going to be burning it out with one of the old blades, but you could drill it out, and then you're going to stick the blade in there, the tang, the bottom part, with some epoxy. So as far as the handle goes, there's a lot of different styles, but the only thing you really have to do is you have to taper the handle when it starts to meet up with the blade. It really has to get thin. If it's not, it won't be able to reach the wood properly that you're trying to cut. You really won't, on certain shapes of wood it'll be worse, but you can see in these illustrations I'm trying to show that you're not going to be able to get contact with the thing you're trying to carve because the handle is going to be sticking out. Okay, so the order in which you do this is important. Basically, because we want to taper it so much, it's going to be too thin to stand on its own. So you have to do a lot of the tapering after you have the epoxy in and the blade. And as you can see on the right, the walls are very thin. So if you tried to get them that thin, say like after the hole was drilled, then it'd be nothing backing it up, and the wood would break, or you maybe would just go straight through it. Now, if you did it, you can't do it before you drill the hole because the holes are really hard to get exact. So that's the other thing is that you wouldn't have any room for error. So the best thing to do is rough it, then make your hole, and then after the epoxy and blade are in there, you do your kind of finishing off a little bit as safe as you can without because also you don't want to do a bunch of roughing with the blade there already in, because you could cut yourself or just damage the blade by running another blade into it a bunch of times. Okay, so I lost the footage of me carving my handle that I'll be using, so I'm just gonna talk over this image. Besides the tapering on the blade, the rest of the handle is really up to you. If you're starting from a dowel like I did, which is one of the dowels you've seen me carve in the other videos, there's not a whole lot to do. Basically, you flatten out the sides a little bit, maybe make a tail on it, up or down, depends on what you want to do, and then taper it at the end, and that's really it. And just keep kind of gripping it and seeing how it feels, and then go for that. This is when you figure out what kind of handle you like. A lot of blade makers will sell just the blade, and you can make your own handle, and it's a little bit cheaper. There's the shipping's not as much, and it's more fun, it's more romantic, and then some instances if you have specific needs arthritically or your hand size, then it's a necessity, and this is a good time to figure it out. Make a few of these with these throwaway blades, and kind of spend some time with each one and see what you like. A lot of times just holding it in your hand isn't really a good measure of how good it is, because how it feels when you just hold it without any resistance on it is not really the test of what a carving handle is. Maybe the stresses that go onto it in your hand, you can only feel while you're carving, and sometimes only after a certain amount of time carving. There's a lot of new ergonomic handles. I won't name any names, but you'll probably run into them on the net if you do a search for handle styles. But I think they're kind of, for me, they turned out to be in the camp of infomercial products. Okay, so here's a quick little view of what the tip of my knife looked like. The handle. That was about how much room I left after I'd carved it, and so. Again, this method, it's just kind of something in case, if you don't have a drill, don't feel comfortable with drilling into the end of a knife and making a hole like that. This works. And it is a little bit more functional because it makes a hole the perfect size. If you use a drill, it's the size, and it gets really wide. So what you really have to do is you have to make a bunch of little drill holes and then kind of clean out the like a rectangle instead of something that's really wide, because again, because of the taper thing with the handle, you really can't just like start drilling a bunch of huge holes and then have it go in there. So it is functional to have it very close to the size of the tang that's going to go in there. So basically, I'm just heating this thing up and slowly burning a hole out with the end of it. I'm using some vice grips, and I've got some water nearby. And you can maybe wear some gloves or something. But it didn't go too bad. But you guys, please be careful. Take all precautions. Think about what's going to happen and what could go wrong before you start doing this. Because besides burning yourself, this thing's hot. Oh, see, there you go, right there. There was a problem there. I was relying on the vice grips a little too much, and I was pressing a little too hard. You really shouldn't need to press very much. If the thing's hot enough, it'll burn its way out. And so just take your time and burn a little bit at a time. And it shouldn't take too long. And really, this is the first time I've done this. So it went pretty well. I mean, it's kind of a pain to drill out holes for these things, because the drill bits of this size, they drift quite a bit. They bend because they're so thin, and it's kind of hard to get that little space out right, especially on the regular knife tangs are much bigger and they go in deeper. So this is a good option. I think if I was going to do it maybe on a higher scale, maybe with a propane torch, and then just get like a scrap piece of steel that I could use. I don't know. You guys will deal with that way down the line, but it's the same idea always when you're putting a tool into a handle. You make a hole somehow, and then you stick the tool in there. It's pretty basic, but again, with the carving knives specifically, because you want it to taper right up next to the blade. You just want to be a little bit careful in the whole process. You can have the hole be a little bit off. You can. What I'm trying to say is, on some of my early knives, I didn't do a great job on the hole, and so basically when I would making the taper, there would be epoxy showing, which is you guys will see that in a little bit. It's a 2-part epoxy, but that's what we filled the hole with before we stick the knife in there. It's a really thick stuff, and it's pretty strong generally, but it can be showing. Like it's more important for the taper to be there than the wood to be covering all of the epoxy. But some of it can show. It's not that big of a deal. And if you're worried about it, you can mix it with some sawdust from the wood you're using, and it'll make it the color of your wood. So you can see it's already kind of done here. Really didn't take that long. I don't know why I was so impatient with it. Just do a few more. Really get it in there. You do want to have room, to put epoxy in there. That's kind of another issue with the epoxy is it's always the battle, because it's so thick that and you're putting it in such a small space that it immediately traps all the air inside, and it's hard to get the epoxy to go down in there. But you'll see me battle with that in a little bit. So, okay, and here, this is what you want to do. You don't want to set down your hot metal anywhere. Even if it's not glowing, it's still hot. You'll hear it go tss in the water. You want to make sure to do that, and then put it in a safe place. Watch all that stuff. Okay, so here's my gross little cardboard thing where I do epoxy stuff. It's my throwaway cardboard thing. So I put out kind of 2 parts. A lot of people make this epoxy. Sometimes it's called 2-ton epoxy. Sometimes it's a 5-minute. Really doesn't matter. And some people sell it in like a single use, like a syringe, and it gets pushed out at the same time. It depends on if you think you're going to use it again or not, really. The tubes you just saw had like the really big tubes. So that's kind of the extra large size. There's a size that it's just, I think it's 2 syringes, and then you push that out, and then there's a side where it's just one syringe. It's like a one-time use or something like that. So you can see I kind of have these like little strips of wood that are just kind of scrap, that real thin little things that I kind of use to push the epoxy down in there. Now, I've been making these things for a long time. I haven't gotten any more neat or learned any lessons at all. Um, you guys should be putting masking tape around the handle and up near the top of it, because it's going to kind of go everywhere. It's okay right on the top, but if you want to put it there too, that's fine. It makes it easier later. You can get this stuff off, but it's not very easy, and I don't know. I'm forever just do not have patience. But you should also put it on the blade, because guess what? You're going to be cut with the blade. You don't want epoxy all over it. So yeah, kind of mask off everything before you do this. There I get the masking tape out finally. Now I'm doing it here that I put it in a jar because you want it to stand up straight. The epoxy is pretty thick, but it does drift a little bit while it's drying. So you want it to stand up straight, and then you want to take a look at the blade, make sure that's straight, and follow all the instructions of your epoxy. They're all kind of different depending on the time or whatever, whoever makes them. But don't be afraid of them. They're easy to use. And that's really it. Okay, so this is our little knife after it's been the epoxy is dried. You can clean some of it with the other knife, kind of do this sort of deal, and then we're gonna cut this off. Hopefully you guys maybe did that beforehand. And you could either saw through it, or I'll show you how to whittle through it. So I probably could have shown this earlier in one of the other carving videos, because I did talk about it, but basically cutting through a piece completely. So, but what I'm doing here is I've taped up the blade with some paper towel masking tape, so that I can grab onto this thing and not worry about it. Even with stuff on it, you want to be careful because it can push through. It is sharp. So basically, I'm just gonna do some stop cuts until I kill the thing. It's just like chopping down a tree in a mini version. And this is you can see that my left index finger has an injury on it. Which actually you can see that it's not blood, it's got like some stain in there, and I might have tattooed my finger. It's kind of funny. Anyway, but that's actually from a similar incident that I was cutting through something and just was not being smart about it, and when it got too thin, instead of breaking it, I was pointing the wrong way, and I was using a big knife and just dug right into my finger. I'll tell you what, that was a bleeder. But here I'm off camera. You can't see at all what I'm doing, so that's pretty helpful. But there was that little tear off that was hanging off after I broke it, so I'm just kind of cutting that. Use a little diagonal cut and go around the edge. Don't want to kind of cheat against the grain. And I'll do a little bit afterwards. Now the tip that was covering the blade fell off, unfortunately, and you can see right now why you don't want to do too much carving with the blade on there. So it's pretty much done, and I'll go check it, see how it feels. Alright, I like it. Feels good. Yep. Got a funky design on the end of it. And I'm just going to put some butcher block oil on there. It's an oil that is it'll kind of seal it without putting any like seal on the top of the wood. You really don't need to seal it at all, because your hands are going to be rubbing on it so much it'll rub the seal off and it'll get gross. So this just kind of seals the wood a little bit and still allows it to have a patina. Not get too weird, but you really don't need to put anything on there at all, especially on these knives, which are not really going to be real permanent. They're just kind of for fun. But you can pick up some butcher block oil. There's a few different companies that make it. You might use it down the road if you want to make some spoons or bowls, and we'll go over that later. Alright, so and also, I guess the butcher block oil, I'll put it on there because it kind of gives it a bit of a finished look, especially with these lighter woods. They're just so light and chalky looking. Before they get patinaed and stuff, they just, I don't know, they look funky. So this kind of makes the top layers of wood a little bit like I don't know, they glow a little bit, a little luster going on. I don't know. So I hope you guys enjoyed this. And if you enjoy wood carving, wood carving, enjoyed making the knife, definitely think about making your own handles down the road. A lot of these guys sell blades and tools without a handle. And at some point, it might be that your handles break, or you get vintage tools and they need new handles. So you'll be able to take this a long way. And I hope you guys enjoyed that. And be safe while you're making these. Alright, guys?